Hey guys, and welcome back to Gardens and Grace. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Tasha. And today I want to talk about chickens and how we can use them in a backyard garden and what it means to keep chickens in a backyard garden. I feel like there's been such a misconception when it comes to chickens. There's a lot of people who are kind of getting into this whole idea of homesteading. There's a lot of people who are getting into an idea of, building some food security and raising some of what they eat. And it doesn't take long before we start with that mindset, before we start getting into chickens. And I've seen a lot of negative responses, I think, to people getting chickens, which baffles me. I keep chickens and it's not hard. It's super easy, actually. Chickens are probably one of the easiest animals to care for. I have a dog and I have chickens. At the end of the day, I will tell you, my chickens are much easier to take care of than my dog. Now, I love my dog more, obviously, but my chickens are pretty easy to take care of. So it is an investment to keep chickens for money and for time to start with. There is kind of a commitment that goes along with, with that and some responsible things that we need to do as, if we're going to keep chickens in our backyard. There's laws and regulations we should know and things like that. So I definitely don't want to say keeping chickens in your backyard is right for every single person. But I do want to have a real discussion about who it could be beneficial for and what that really could look like for you. Okay, so the very first thing to know about keeping chickens is that everything likes to eat chickens. Chickens taste great. Everything likes to eat them. So because of that, we have to provide protection if we're going to keep chickens. I have a pretty well-built coop and a nice size run attached to it, but not everybody needs that. You really just need to think this. For your chickens, you need to provide protection if you're going to keep them in your backyard. Chickens do like to free range. If you have the ability to free range them, that's awesome. But at night, they need some type of protection. A coop or a house, something that, and it does not have to be elaborate. Even people who aren't handy, there's a ton of resources for you to be able to build a simple coop. They don't need anything fancy. You can get fancy with your chicken coop building, but you don't have to. The main thing is the predators you're going to worry about for chickens are during the day, you're going to have birds of prey. So because of that, you kind of want something overhead to protect them, or, something that would deter the birds from coming after your chickens. Now, a lot of people free range their chickens. If you have a lot of space and you can free range them, that's okay. You may lose some to birds of prey. I'll just be honest with you, it's possible. Now at night, you're talking raccoons and possums. If you had something wide open, you may even have, coyotes, foxes, you name it. But for me, in my residential neighborhood, in my backyard that is fenced in, the thing that I'm gonna worry about would be raccoons or possums. Because of that, I need to make sure that I have a coop that is predator proof. It's very, very, very important. Raccoons can open simple locks. On my coop doors, I have a lock and then it kind of pulls down, and then I have a pin that I put in the back of it. It has a hole in the back and I put a pin in it. You can do a lot of research on that. Honestly, some of it's kind of common sense if you start getting started with your latch and with your lock, just making sure that it's raccoon proof. You can do some research on figuring that out. It only really takes a little bit of time. You can buy a prefabricated coop if you want to go that route. They are going to cost a little bit of money. So tip number 2 when it comes to backyard chicken keeping is they need to eat a lot. I think somebody told me that birds eat 1/3 of their body weight every day. I think that's probably true of chickens because my chickens will eat constantly. I can feed them kitchen scraps, and I can come out there with a whole bowl of kitchen scraps, and in a matter of minutes it's gone. If you're free ranging your chickens, they don't need as much chicken feed. I would personally still give them a chicken feed, even if you're free ranging them. But if you're free ranging them, they're very good at foraging and finding their own food. I do not have the ability to free range right now my chickens are in an enclosed space. So I bring them a lot of chicken scraps, a lot of things from the garden, but I also give them a high quality chicken feed. Chickens are not like dogs or cats where they only eat once or twice a day. Chickens need access to food almost constantly. I mean, you could theoretically put their food up at night if you wanted to. I have done that in the past. I don't really do that right now. I let them have access to food pretty much 24/7 and water. Chickens will drink a ton of water. They need lots and lots of clean water. So if you're gonna have chicken, you're gonna need to have it set in your mind that you need to check their food and water every single day. In addition to a high quality chicken feed, if you're keeping your chickens for egg production, you want to add something like an oyster shell or some type of supplement that's high in calcium to help them produce their eggs. Producing an egg takes a lot of calcium, because if you have backyard chickens and they're not able to forage and grab all the things that they need, although their chicken feed is high quality, even if you're feeding them a high quality chicken feed, it's a good best practice to supplement with something like oyster shell that's high in calcium. It will replenish the calcium that they're losing in egg production, and it's just going to keep your chickens healthier, and it's going to keep the shells of the eggs harder. If you're keeping chickens for egg production, high quality food, access to fresh grass whenever possible, or kitchen scraps, and add in some oyster shell or something of that nature that's high in calcium. Tip number 3 when it comes to keeping backyard chickens is make sure that you are allowed to keep them in the area that you're in. So some cities and towns have strict regulations when it comes to chicken keeping. A lot of places will allow you to keep hens, but they won't allow you to keep roosters. A lot of cities have regulations on how many chickens you can keep. In my area, I'm not allowed to have roosters. I am allowed to have hens, and I'm allowed to have up to 10 in my backyard. I currently have 6. So I would check with your local regulations are for chicken keeping in your backyard, in your area where you're at. The 4th tip to keeping chickens is that while they are very easy to take care of, they are very easy to take care of actually, if not properly maintained, chickens are stinky. They're nasty. And so if you have a coop, if you have a chicken coop and you keep your chickens in the coop, they're going to poop when they sleep. Most of the time when chickens poop, it is when they sleep. So wherever they sleep, they are going to poop. My suggestion on that is to use what we call the deep litter method for your coops. Now, you don't have to use that. You could go out there theoretically and clean your coop out once a week, kind of keep the smell to a minimum, you would be able to keep the flies to a minimum, things of that nature, because it will bring in flies. So you could go out there and clean out their coop, whatever space that they're in once a week. That's a viable option. I personally like to do things the lazy way. I do not do that. I do something called a deep litter method. So with the deep litter method, I use pine shavings that I get from Tractor Supply, and I will add a considerable amount of pine shavings to their coop. And once a week I go out and I add more pine shavings so that I wind up with like 18 inches. I'm not adding a whole bag of pine shavings every time I go out, but once a week I'll go add a little bit of pine shavings, and I'll just kind of keep the manure, the chicken manure, covered with the pine shavings. Now, what that does is it will actually compost the chicken manure in place, because if we add something like pine shavings, which are high in carbon, with the, in the coop, the chicken manure is high in nitrogen. So by adding a bedding that's high in carbon, like pine shavings, in with that nitrogen, we're going to create the conditions that are right for composting. And as we're adding the pine shavings in and the chickens are kind of scratching around, it kind of keeps things aerated. And so what'll happen is we'll have less smell and we'll have composting beginning to take place. We can then if we're using the deep litter method, what we could do is we can then clean out the coop. Some people do it once a year. I actually do it between 2 and 4 times a year. We'll clean out the coop, and I'll kind of clean everything out. Every 3 to 6 months, I'll kind of clean everything out, and I will add it to my compost pile. During the fall, I will do a big clean out, and I will actually not even add it to the compost pile. I will add it to my garden beds that don't have any food growing in them. The reason why that's important is this. Chicken manure is very high in nitrogen, And so we want to allow it enough time to compost down so it's not hot. We would call it hot, meaning it's too high in nitrogen to be good for our plants. So by adding it in the fall, when all of my beds are in a time of rest and I don't have a lot of food growing in them, or I don't have any food growing in them, then I allow the winter time for that to break down and continue to compost in place. Now, if I don't have beds that are free, like I said, I will add it directly to my compost pile. If you wanted to use the deep litter method, that's my suggestion. Like I said, you could also just clean your coop out once a week if that's something you want to do. But chickens do smell terribly if not maintained properly. Tip number 5 when it comes to keeping chickens is to provide a space for them to lay eggs. Now, chickens can lay a lot of eggs depending on the breed that you're going to get. We're going to talk about that in tip 6. So you're going to want to provide a little space that's semi-private for your chickens to lay eggs in. They like to be in a confined space that's a little private when they lay eggs. They're shy when it comes to their egg laying. So you'll make your chickens much happier if you can provide them a nesting box that allows a little privacy when they lay eggs. In addition to creating a nesting box that's semi-private for your chickens to lay eggs in, be prepared and ready to deal with the fresh eggs that are coming in. Now, chickens can be prolific. We're going to talk about breeds in a second, but you're probably going to get quite a bit of fresh eggs, and having a plan to deal with those fresh eggs is important. Chickens oftentimes don't lay throughout the winter, so they will lay an abundance of eggs in the spring, the summer, and even into the fall, and the egg laying will begin to slow down, at least for most chicken breeds, in the winter months. Now, some chicken breeds will lay through the winter, but they just may not produce as many eggs. So keeping all of that in mind, you can freeze your eggs. Fresh eggs actually keep well on a counter if they are not washed. That's really important. If we wash our fresh eggs, although a lot of times we want to wash our fresh eggs because they're going to come in dirty and muddy and covered in yuckiness. So we may want to wash our fresh eggs, but if that's the case, if you wash your fresh eggs, you're going to need to put them in the fridge and they're not going to keep as long. If you don't wash them, you can keep them on the counter and they're going to keep for quite some time. So just be aware of that. You can also put some eggs away by freezing them. You can use eggs by making like pasta. A lot of times if I have an abundance of eggs, I will make a lot of pasta dough because it's a good way to use up your eggs. And then you can freeze that pasta, or you can dry the pasta and make it shelf stable. Totally another topic, another video for another time. But the point is, be prepared for the egg harvest that's going to come in. Tip number 6 when it comes to backyard chickens is selecting the right breed. So I have black Australorps. All of my chickens right now are black Australorps. There's some other breeds and varieties I want to have. However, I have 6 chickens, and so I'm fighting back and forth. I may go ahead and get 2 more, but I don't want to do too many more than that. So I've been kind of fighting back and forth. But my point is this: do some research on the breed that you're going to get. When I got my Australorps, I did a ton of research before I got them. The reason I got my black Australorps was I knew that they lay well all throughout the year. A black Australorp is a prolific layer. It will lay more than 250 eggs per year, and it's going to lay large brown eggs. I like the brown eggs, and I like the fact that they're going to be large. I like that they're prolific. One of the reasons why I went with them. The other reason I got the black Australorp is I know black Australorp chickens are pretty good in a backyard setting. They're not going to be super loud. Every chicken is a little different, so you're gonna find they have different personalities and quirks. But for the most part, black Australorps are a quieter breed, and I knew that they wouldn't interfere as much in the neighborhood, causing as much commotion for my neighbors. All chickens are going to make noise when they lay their eggs, so that's something to keep in mind. They will do it like an egg song when they lay their eggs to announce that they're laying an egg. But for the most part, there are breeds of chickens that are a little bit quieter. Your hens are going to be quieter, obviously, than your roosters in all chickens. But do your research on the breed that you get. The other reason I chose the black Australorp was because it does well in confinement. I don't have the ability to free range my chickens, at least not all of the time. And so while I created a run that has a decent amount of space, they are in a limited confined space. So I wanted a breed that could handle confinement. A black Australorp can do that. So do the research. for yourself to determine what chicken breed or breeds is going to be right for your backyard setting. There's a lot of different options to choose from. Tip number 7 when it comes to raising backyard chickens is be prepared for your chickens to go broody. Now, what does that mean? A lot of people ask me, we hear that term broody. What does that mean? That means that a mama hen sits on a clutch of eggs. It can be her eggs or the whole flock's eggs. Usually it's the whole flock's eggs. And she will sit on that clutch of eggs and she refuses to get up. And 21 days is how long it takes for baby chickens to hatch. And during that time, she will pluck out the feathers on her underbelly to create, to be able to sit on those eggs and kind of create warmth, and her body temperature will rise, and she will be really agitated and aggravated if you try to move her to collect the eggs. Now, we want to collect the eggs, so sometimes, like for me, a broody chicken can be a bad thing because I want to go out there and collect the eggs. There are a lot of things that you can do to try to get your chickens out of being broody, but here's the thing. For the most part, that chicken is going to go broody for 21 days, about 21 days, until it's time for the baby chicks to hatch. Now, if you don't have a rooster, you don't have any baby chicks, you don't have any fertilized eggs, those chickens are not going to hatch. So do your research there's, like I said, there's a lot of different things and methods you can do to try to get them out of the broodiness. What I tend to do is just let it happen. I will go out and move my chickens out of the way, collect the eggs, they will sit back down, and in that same spot, and within a couple weeks it's usually over with. So I tend to kind of not worry about it as much, but that's just something for you to keep in mind and how you deal with it. Tip number 8 when it comes to keeping backyard chickens is realizing that chickens are incredibly destructive. So if you allow your chickens to free range in your backyard, I'm going to tell you what you're going to deal with. You're going to deal with them flying into places that you do not want them. They are going to eat things. If you have a garden, they are going to eat the produce in your garden. Chickens are great for the garden, and they're also absolutely horrible for the garden. So if you have a garden, you have to protect it from your chickens. And if you allow them to free range, they're going to wind up in places like your back porch. I was talking to a good friend of mine today, and he was telling me that he's got to build a run for his chickens because his chickens free range. And he was telling me that he's going to build a run for his chickens because they're pooping all over his back porch. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have chickens, they're going to be destructive. They're going to get into everything. Chickens are incredibly inquisitive and they're incredibly curious, and they're going to get into all the places that you do not want them to be. So either you can confine them or just be aware. If you're going to allow them to free range and you're not going to have them confined, then just be aware that they are probably going to get into places that maybe you don't want them to be. Tip number 9 when it comes to raising backyard chickens is that chickens do not do well in the heat. Most chickens are fairly cold hardy. They can tolerate cold temperatures pretty well. We do want to offer some protection during the winter. It's one of the reasons why we have a coop, and we provide bedding and things like that. But chickens will roost close together, and they will keep themselves warm. They like to roost high up if possible. So bonus tip, in your coop, if you can create a roost that's higher up off the ground, your chickens are going to like that. They're going to roost and kind of huddle all together. And throughout the winter months, they will keep themselves warm that way. So you may not have to provide much protection. It kind of really depends on your region and your area. Where I'm at in southeastern North Carolina, zone 8A, we get cold, but we don't get that cold. So I don't have to provide a whole lot of protection for my chickens. Now, if you get up into colder ranges than I have, there's a lot of things you can do. There are heaters and things of that nature that you can do. Like a water heater to keep the water from being frozen is a really good practice during the winter if you expect freezing or below freezing temperatures. More importantly, they don't do very well in the heat of the summer. Most chickens can survive the summer temperatures. They're built to do so, but we need to provide a few things for them to do so. Chickens need access to water continuously. They are always going to be drinking. The other thing that chickens really need is shade. A good amount of shade is a really good idea. So my chicken coop has an overhang that provides a lot of shade for my chickens. I also have space underneath my coop for the chickens to get up underneath there. They've dug out places underneath the coop for them to be able to dust bathe. It keeps them a little cooler, and weirdly enough, it's how they clean themselves. So during the hottest parts of the summer, we want to make sure that they have access to fresh water at all times, and we want to provide a considerable amount of shade so that our chickens can stay cool. In short, I think it can be a really great experience to keep backyard chickens. It goes a long way for food security, for food sustainability. It goes a long way in helping us in the garden. If we grow a garden, chickens' manure is one of the best things we can put on that garden. Chickens are fairly easy to keep. All the things that we talked about here, I actually spend maybe 10 minutes on average a day taking care of my chickens. In the morning, make sure they have food and water. I check that again at night just to make sure, but typically they're good. Now, sometimes they'll spill their food or whatever, so I'll have to refill it, but I let them out in the morning. I don't have an automatic door. Some people do. I open the chicken coop every morning and I close them in their chicken coop every night. Oh, bonus tip. Chickens will put themselves to bed. You don't even have to round them up at night. It will get to a certain point in the day around sunset. My chickens are starting to wander in their coop right now. That's why I'm looking over there. But around sunset, chickens, or just after sunset, chickens will start to go into the coop themselves. And then you just come along behind them and shut the door. Or if you have an automatic door, you won't even have to worry about that. I come out once a week and add a little bit of litter. That might take me an additional 10 minutes during the, that time where I'm adding some litter, and I clean their coop out every couple of months. But all in all, keeping chickens is fairly simple. It's fairly easy. I want to encourage you, do some research, think about it. Maybe chicken keeping isn't right for you right this moment, but I do encourage you to think about it. I encourage you to do some research. I encourage you to ponder what that could be in your life, because I think it's a really great thing for the modern homesteader. Even for those of us living in just a normal city setting. I have a normal backyard. I keep chickens. I have a large garden. And I live in a normal little neighborhood with a normal sized backyard. So it is doable, possible. More than that, I have a ton of fun with it. Chickens are fun. That's the other thing. Chickens are fun. Chicken math is a real thing. If you get chickens, you'll probably find yourself wanting more chickens. and you'll have to fight that wanting more chickens and having enough space to keep your chickens if you're like me. But chickens can be a ton of fun. They're inquisitive, they're curious, they're entertaining just to watch. Don't be afraid to get some backyard chickens for yourself. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, guys, and having this conversation about what it is to keep backyard chickens. May your garden be filled with grace, and may you be abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.